Residents of Pawhuska might remember the restaurant Saucy Calf that closed in December 2024. What people may not know, however, is that the owner actually named the restaurant, got the name Saucy Calf, from an actual person, an Osage Nation citizen who lived more than 100 years ago. The restaurant's owner was a descendant of his and named the restaurant in his honor. Regardless of whether or not you've ever heard of the person Saucy Calf, I hope by the end of this video you will agree that he lived an interesting life. Unfortunately, even though he lived to be about 70 years old, his life was cut short in February of 1912. He was the victim of a homicide, which we'll get into later. I must admit I don't know much about his early life, but presumably he would have lived in Kansas before the Osage migrated to Oklahoma. It appears from the things I've read he was very knowledgeable about Osage traditions, something of a good storyteller, and he had a reputation as a highly skilled deer hunter. Unfortunately, although it has been noted Saucy Calf was a homicide victim, in 1895 he was accused of a murder himself. According to an old newspaper article, he was tried for the murder of Walter Bigheart, a fellow Osage, but was found not guilty in a murder trial held by what was described as the Supreme Court of the Osage Nation, consisting of 5 judges. I don't know what evidence there was for or against his guilt, but he was found not guilty, and it doesn't seem that being tried for a murder hurt his reputation or standing much. In fact, just 2 years later, in 1897, he was part of a 3-member Osage delegation that traveled to Washington, D.C. to attend the inauguration of then President William McKinley. While he was at the inauguration, he received some sort of souvenir sword, reportedly from the President McKinley. There will be a little more on this souvenir sword later as well. Now in 1900 he made headlines again for some actions by his wife at the time. Not sure what all the circumstances were regarding this or how it worked, but his wife was reportedly at a feast for some couple that was planning to get married, and she raised an objection and the ceremony had to be canceled and the wedding postponed. Seems like an awful personal situation to be publicizing, but check out the headline. Marriage postponed. Mrs. Saucy Calf objects, and Paul Red Eagle is single. Now, I'm not sure when, but this wife of Saucy Calf apparently preceded him in death. It's my understanding he was widowed when he passed away in 1912. In 1907, Oklahoma became a state, and of course Saucy Calf lived long enough to see that transition, along with another member of his family. It was reported in 1911 that Saucy Calf's mother, Wanna Wood, passed away, and apparently her exact age was not known, but everyone believed her to be more than 100 years old. Another anecdote about Saucy Calf: apparently he was known to take occasional trips to Bartlesville, hauling his blue wagon with his name in red letters on the back of what we might now think of as the tailgate. So at the time of his death, Saucy Calf was living in what's known as the Indian Village or Indian Camp in Pawhuska. This area, the Pawhuska Indian Village, is still owned by the Osage Nation. His body was discovered after his house burned down in a fire. However, it was determined, even with the primitive forensics and investigative tools at the time, that Saucy Calf was most likely murdered, and the fire was set in order to cover up the crime. During the examination of his body, a wound piercing the side was discovered. Investigating authorities also came to believe that he may well have been murdered by the souvenir sword that was given to him by President McKinley, because it was found by his bed next to the body. There was also a report that he was planning to get married and he was supposed to have met a lady friend at the train depot in Pawhuska. The depot building no longer exists, but this was the place where Saucy Calf and his lady friend were supposed to meet and catch a train ride to Bartlesville in order to get married. But obviously, he never showed up. There were some suspects that were eventually identified and even arrested, but they were all eventually released. Prior to his death, Saucy Calf had also been working with a researcher to document Osage customs and traditions. His sudden death was an unfortunate blow to this research. Saucy Calf's body was buried in the Pawhuska City Cemetery, and his funeral was reportedly attended by 2,000 people. And as reported earlier, years later, one of his descendants would name a restaurant in his honor. Well, I hope you all found this video interesting. Thank you for watching.